You're in the right place at the right time. This is Coast to Coast AM, blasting out of the Mojave Desert like a Scirocco, blazing across the land, slamming into your radio like a supercharged nanoparticle of unobtainium. Greetings from the boldest, bawdiest, most outrageous city in the world, the planetary capital of sun, fun, sin, sex, and secrets, my not-so-humble hometown, Las Vegas, Nevada. My name is George Knapp, your occasional host, designated driver of the airwaves, and moderator of tonight's upcoming cavalcade of conversation.
Well, hello everybody. How is everybody doing on this spooky Sunday stream, a special edition of the Davey Crocko, the Sunday spooky stream. That's what we are doing today. Now, quick disclaimer, everybody that's usually here that likes to enjoy the deep dives, maybe some spurgery, maybe an investigation into a grifter, maybe a wild conspiracy. We need to check some things at the door. We need to have some fun. Sunday's my day off. Sometimes you need to break the monotony. You need to break the actual stressful streams, some infighting and trolling, and let's just have some fun, enjoy the stories, and just have a good time. Today we are going to bring you a very mysterious, the unexplainable, the unimaginative stories of missing 411, a mystery that has not been solved. We will also be bringing you something known as staircases in the woods. It was in the early 90s. A man named Raymond Williams, an ex-park ranger during the 1960s, actually had witnessed and remembered and logged down in his journal some of these cases. He would not know they would go on to be a phenomenon known as missing 411. He didn't know it would be an internet story. In the 1960s, this man patrolled in Wyoming and would help on many search and rescue events. Years later, he would die mysteriously. His family, going through his attic, would find multiple journals full of stories, full of mystery, full of intrigue. The family finally went out and hired somebody to then narrate these stories. Today I will be bringing you those narrations. So I hope everybody can have a fun time. Brian Bowman says, God, it's you again. I'm going to take that as a very positive statement. Why does it keep doing this thing where it's like, is it buffering on your end? Is there any pausing on your end? Is there any weirdness on your end? I don't want to start it off. Just let me know if there's any buffering going on. See that little pause right there? That's very weird. That never happens. Don't like that. But hopefully everything goes smooth for the rest of the stream. Maybe I should just refresh and shut up. Okay, yeah, just me. Good, just me. Something spooky is already happening. Wait, what was that? I like that. Something spooky is already going down. Nice. Alright. So like I said, we're going to start off with something called staircases in the woods. Now, to understand this story, I told you guys that this was a man Okay. This man's name was Raymond Williams, a park ranger in Wyoming in the 1960s, died mysteriously, and years later, when his family cleaned out his attic, they would find journals upon journals of just amazing stories, suspenseful stories he would write about his times helping with search and rescue. This phenomenon became known as staircases in the woods. There's been local news reports. There's been multiple eyewitness reports of these. They are deep in the darkest forests. Forests.
A person driving Interstate 40 in East Asheville spotted something that piqued her interest.
A mysterious stairway in the woods.
What are these mysterious staircases in the woods? He would not know that this would link up with later what they would call missing 411 cases. He was unaware. Nature can be a cruel mistress. Beneath its beauty lies an underbelly of primal fear for some of those who dare venture too deep. Since the beginning of mankind, and even before that, we have endeavored to explore the realms of our wilderness, but in the process, many have failed to return. In recent history, a bizarre phenomenon has been growing. This is the perplexing mystery of the many hundreds of thousands of missing persons known as Missing 411. If you're not familiar with what Missing 411 is, it is just the documentation and the investigation of an ex-police officer named David Paulides, who would start documenting each specific case and then narrowing them down with certain characteristics that fit each case to make it a Missing 411 case. Now, as I said, this man, Raymond Williams, it's totally not a made-up name, guys. This is a real story. Raymond Williams would write this journal. Years later, after his family found it, they would hire someone to narrate this for them. So, without further ado, we are going to just listen to some of this man's stories. Now, a lot of this we're just going to be playing the stories, the narrations, some of the investigations. I will chime in when needed, but mostly these stories speak for themselves. So these staircases to nowhere, are these staircases to hell? Where are they going? Neon Fire Squad, very good to see you. Very good to see you. Okay, so I bring you. Now the person narrating this is not involved in the case at all, but the family hired a few people to tell these stories. They had about 5 journals full of stories. After Missing 411 investigation went on, people started seeing some parallels between the stories. So this was a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service, and he had some stories to tell. Now these came out in the late 2000s, I think they finally came out. He was in the 90s, early internet days. He was posting these for whoever could find them. He had written journals as well.
I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been a search and rescue officer for a few years now, and along the way, I've seen some things that I think you guys would be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time they wander off the path or slip down a small cliff, and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old stay where you are thing, and they don't wander far. But I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing person cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man and seemed pretty calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall and covered in hair, like a bear, and that he had a weird face. We searched the area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere, and we never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could have possibly gone. because neither her mother or grandpa saw her come down. A few times I've been out on my own searching with a canine, and they've tried to lead me straight up cliffs. Not hills, not even rock faces. Straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling. In those cases, we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff, or miles away from where the canine has led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange. One particularly sad case involved the recovery of a body. A 9-year-old girl fell down an embankment and got impaled on a dead tree at the base. It was a complete freak accident, but I'll never forget the sound her mother made when we told her what had happened. She saw the body bag being loaded into the ambulance, and she let out the most haunting, heartbroken wail I've ever heard. It was like her whole life was crashing down around her, and a part of her had died with her daughter. I heard from another search and rescue officer that she killed herself a few weeks after it happened. She couldn't live with the loss of her daughter. I was teamed up with another search and rescue officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevasse with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and the guy turned around, and he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night, climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible, muffled screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved the search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large, rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us to base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking why that big man with the black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we get to the base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of base ops, the woman turns to me, and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I had a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's almost completely hidden under my collar. I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear the weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say, I was really happy when we left the area that night. This is the last one I'll tell, and it's probably the weirdest story I have. Now, I don't know if this is true in every search and rescue unit, but in mine, it's sort of an unspoken, regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other search and rescue officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors, and at this point we've all gotten so used to it that it doesn't seem that weird anymore. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and the other officer told me not to worry about it, that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told very emphatically that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now when I run into them, because it happens so frequently. I have a lot more of these stories, and I suppose if anyone's interested, I'll tell you some tomorrow. If anyone has any theories about the stairs, or if you've seen them too, let me know.
Okay, so that's our first entry they found. Now, he ended up, this was the early days of the internet, he was posting them on early blog sites, messenger sites, he was writing them out, storing them on his computer for different books. Some didn't get uploaded, and some were written in journals, and they sourced these out to a couple different narrators. I chose this guy because I think his voice perfectly fits, to tell these stories of this man who was a search and rescue officer, a park ranger, but he also worked for the U.S. Forest Service and was involved in all these searches. So he's just about to get into the staircases in the woods. Very spooky stuff to start. So I hope you guys are enjoying some of this stuff. Here's some more examples of staircases in the woods. They trend from old-style castles that withered away to actual modern stairs, like carpeted stairs in the middle of the woods. We're talking out of nowhere, out of place. You could tell a story for this one. You could say, oh, that used to be a castle, now it's in the woods. I have some of these near me. It's called White Lady's Castle. The legend goes, and maybe I'll do a stream from there one day. I'll go there and then film it, and I'll tell you guys the story. But a person that lived in a castle, a very young woman, was held captive, raped, beaten, killed, and now she haunts the castle, or what is left of the castle. We got the top piece to it and a staircase leading up to it. But it's not in the middle of the woods because they built a street through the middle of the woods, fucking modern day people. So far, everybody is enjoying this so far. I'm very happy that you guys enjoy these kind of different stories off topic from usual, because I enjoy these stories. And sometimes we can mix both of them, where it's something actual real, but it is a little spooky, and then you got these kind of just plain spooky stories with a hint of reality to them. This is an actual story. I know people are going to tell me, oh, no, I Googled this, and I found a lady that said she wrote these stories, so all I know is this man was found dead mysteriously, and they found these journals. And I think that's better for telling this story. But yeah, I'm very happy you guys are enjoying this. Like I said, I'll interrupt. The stories go from like 8 to 20 minutes long, and it seems like you guys are cool with just listening to the stories. Not needed. Davey, not needed. But since it's my stream, I don't want to just play clips of people's channel. I want to chime in with different things here and there. But I will play through each specific video. As you can see here, it's actually a 8-part playlist. I think it'd be about an hour and 10 minutes total. So you got 8 minutes, 23, 25, 27, 17, 14, and 22 minutes. So I'll play each one, and then, we'll get a good variety of each entry he put into this journal. And then in between, I'll tell some stories. So we're about to get into the next clip. It looks like he was just about to get into staircases in the woods. These are isolated stairs in the woods, creepy stories. Many famous staircases have a story behind them. Like I said, you could have a reason. You got the Spanish Steps in Rome, the Loretto staircase in somewhere like Santa Fe. and the steps that lead to nowhere in the Winchester Mansion are just a few. But while these iconic structures may be legendary, another category of strange staircases has also created a recent buzz across the internet. Numerous people have been coming forward with reports of isolated stairs in the woods and national parks. The phenomenon has also brought out some of the creepiest stories about otherworldly experiences when someone climbed a mysterious staircase that was sitting alone in the forest. They say to never climb these staircases if you come across them. Now, some of these weird stairs in the forest stand miles from the closest settlement without any logical reason for them to be there. They can differ wildly in style, age, condition, design. Often there is no clue as to why they are there, and their isolation only deepens the mystery. With some of the structures, it is as if someone built the steps and then simply walked away.
So I logged back on tonight and was blown away by the staggering amount of interest this seems to have generated. First off, I'll address a few things that you guys have brought up. There's been an overwhelming amount of people mentioning the similarity between some of my stories and those of David Paulides. I assure you, I'm not trying to rip him off in any way.
So, this is the narrator adding in that people were saying, oh, these stories sound like Missing 411. Well, you have to explain, these journals were found 20 years before early internet age. These journals and these blogs were found way before Missing 411 did its investigation. So a very, very similar trends in the stories, but two independent people telling these stories, which just only gives it more credence to be true.
Got nothing but respect for the guy. He's actually what inspired me to write this, because I can verify a lot of the things he talks about. We don't have a lot of these strange missing persons cases, and most of the time they aren't solved. Either that, or we find them in places they have no business being. I personally haven't been on many calls like that, but I'll share a few that I've seen, and a story my friend told me that relates to this. There was a lot of feedback about the stairs, so I'll touch on that briefly, and I'll include a story. They come in a variety of shapes, sizes, styles, and conditions. Some are pretty dilapidated, just ruins, but others are brand new. I saw one set that looked like they came from a lighthouse. They were metal and spiral, almost old-fashioned. The stairs don't go up infinitely or farther than I can see, but some sets are taller than others. Like I said before, just imagine the stairs in your house as if someone cut and copied them in the middle of nowhere. I don't have any pictures. It's never really occurred to me to try again after the first time, and I don't really feel like risking my job over it. I'll try again in the future, but I can't really promise anything. A few people expressed confusion about the guy who ran into the man with no face. Just to clarify, when the climber ascended and reached the top of this peak, he saw another man in a parka and ski pants, the man with no face. Sorry about the confusing wording. I'll try to avoid that in the future. On to the stories. As far as missing persons go, I'd say about half the calls I get are related to that. The others are rescue calls. People who fall down cliffs and hurt themselves, get injured by fire. You wouldn't believe how often that happens. Mostly drunk kids. Get bitten or stung by animals or insects, etc. We're a tight team, and we have veterans who are excellent at finding signs of lost people. That's what makes these cases where we never find any trace of them so frustrating. One in particular was upsetting all of us because we did find a trace of them, but it just led to more questions than answers. An older man had been hiking alone on a well-established trail, but his wife called to say that he hadn't come home when he should have. Apparently, he had a history of seizures, and she was worried that he hadn't taken his medication and had suffered one out on the trail. Before you ask, I have no idea why he thought it was okay to go alone, or why she didn't go with him. I don't ask about that kind of thing because past a certain point it really doesn't matter. Someone is missing, and it's my job to find them. We went out in a standard search formation, and it wasn't long before one of our vets found signs that the guy had gone off the trail. We grouped up and followed him, spreading out in fan to make sure we were covering as much ground as possible. Suddenly, a call comes over the radio telling us to all head back to the vet's location, and we come right away, because this usually means the missing person is injured, and we need a full team to help him get to safety. We meet back up, and the vet is standing at the base of a tree with his hands on the sides of his head. I ask my buddy what's going on, and he points up into the branches of this tree. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. But there's a walking stick dangling from a branch at least 30 feet off the ground. The little strap thing on the handle has been looped around the branch and is just hanging there. There's no way the guy could have tossed it up that far, and we don't see any other signs that he's still in the area. We call up into the tree, but it's obvious no one's in it. We're all just sort of left scratching our heads, and we keep searching for the guy, but we never find him. We even bring our canines out, but they lose his scent long before this tree. Eventually, the search is called off, because there are other calls we have to attend to. And past a certain point, there's not much we can do. The guy's wife called us every day for months, asking us if we'd found her husband. And it was heartbreaking to hear her get more and more hopeless each time. I'm not sure why this call in particular was so upsetting, but I think it was just the sheer improbability of it. That and the questions that were raised. How the hell had this guy's cane ended up there? Did someone kill him and toss it up there as some weird trophy? We did our best to find him, but it was almost like a taunt. We still think about that one from time to time. Missing kids are the most heartbreaking. Doesn't matter what circumstances they go missing under. It's never easy. And we always dread the ones we find deceased. It's not common, but it does happen. David Polides talks about a lot of kids search and rescue teams find in places they shouldn't be, or couldn't be. I can honestly say I've heard about this kind of thing happening more than I've seen it, but I'll share one of the ones that I think about a lot that I witnessed personally. A mother and her 3 kids were out for a picnic in an area of the park that has a small lake. One is 6, one is 5, and the other is about 3. She's watching them all really closely, and according to her, she never lets them out of her sight at any time. She never saw anyone else in the area either, which is important. She packs their stuff up, and they start to head back to the parking area. Now, this lake is only about 2 miles into the woods, and it's on a very clearly established trail. It's almost impossible to get lost getting from the parking area to it, unless you're deliberately going off the path like an imbecile. Her kids are walking in front of her, when she hears what sounds like someone coming up the path behind her. She turns around, and in the 4 or so seconds she's not looking, her 5-year-old son vanishes. She figures he stepped off the trail to pee or something, and she asks her other 2 where he went. They both tell her that a big man with a scary face came out of the woods next to them, took the kid's hand, and led him into the trees. The 2 remaining kids don't seem upset. In fact, she says later that it seems like they've been drugged. They're sort of spacey and fuzzy. So, of course, she freaks out, starts looking frantically in the area for her kid. She's screaming his name, and she says that at one point she thinks she heard him answer her. Now, obviously she can't go blindly running into the woods. She's got the other 2 kids. So she calls the police and they send us out immediately. We respond and we start the search for him. Over the course of the search, which spans miles, We never find a single trace of the kid. Canines can't pick up any scent. We couldn't find any clothing or broken bushes or literally anything that would signify a child being there. Of course, there's suspicion about the mother for a while, but it's pretty clear that she's completely destroyed by the whole thing. We looked for this kid for weeks, with a lot of volunteer help, but eventually the search peters out, and we have to move on. The volunteers keep searching though, and one day we get a call on the radio letting us know that the body has been found and needs to be recovered. They tell us the location, and none of us can believe it. We figure it has to be a different kid, but we go out there, about 15 miles from the site where he vanished, and sure enough, we find the body of the kid we've been looking for. I've been trying to figure out how this kid got where he did ever since we found him, and I've never come up with an answer. A volunteer just happened to be in the area because he figured he might as well look in places no one else would think to on the off chance the body had been dumped. He comes to the base of a tall, rocky slope, and halfway up he sees something. He looks through his binoculars, and sure enough, it's the body of a little boy, stuffed in a little opening in a rock. He recognized the color of the kid's shirt, so he knows right away that it's the missing boy. That's when he calls it in, and we're dispatched. It took us almost an hour to get his body down. None of us could believe what we were seeing. Not only was this kid 15 miles from where he'd started, there was no possible way he could have gotten up there on his own. This slope is treacherous, and it's hard even for us with our climbing gear. A 5-year-old boy had no way of getting up here. Of that, I'm certain. Not only that, but the kid doesn't have a scratch on him. His shoes are gone, but his feet aren't damaged or dirty. So it wasn't as if an animal dragged him up here, and from what we can tell, he hasn't been dead that long. He'd been out there over a month. By that point, it looked like he'd only been dead for, at most, a day or two. The whole thing was unbelievably strange, and was one of the most disconcerting calls I have ever been on. We found out later that the coroner determined the kid had died from exposure. He'd frozen to death, probably late at night, 2 days before we found him. There were no suspects and no answers. To date, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. One of my first jobs as a trainee was a search op for a 4-year-old kid that had gotten separated from his mom. This was one of those cases where we knew we were going to find him because the dogs were on a strong scent trail, and we saw clear signs he was in the area. We ended up finding him in a berry patch about a half a mile from where he'd last been seen. Kid wasn't even aware he'd wandered that far. One of the vets brought him back, which I was glad for because I'm really not good with kids. I find it hard to talk to them and keep them company. As my trainer and I are headed back, she decides to take me on a detour to show me one of the hot spots where we tend to find missing people. It's a natural dip in the land near a popular trail, and people will usually move downhill because it's easier. We hike out there. It's a few miles away, and we get there in about an hour or so. As we're walking around the area, she's pointing out places she's found people in the past. I see something in the distance. Now, this area we're in is about 8 miles from the main parking area, though there's back roads you can take to get closer if you don't want to hike that far. But we're on state-protected land, which means there can't be any kind of commercial or residential development out here. The most you'll ever see is a fire tower or a makeshift shelter that homeless people think they can get away with building. But I can see from here that whatever this thing is has straight edges. And if there's one thing you learn quickly, it's that nature rarely makes straight lines. I point it out, but she doesn't say anything. She just hangs back and lets me wander over and check it out. I get within about 20 feet of it, and all the hair on the back of my neck stands up. It's a staircase in the middle of the fucking woods. In the proper context, it would literally be the most benign thing ever, is just a normal staircase with a beige carpet and about 10 steps tall. But instead of being in a house where it obviously should be, it's out here in the middle of the woods. The sides aren't carpeted, obviously, and I can see the wood it's made of. It's almost like a video game glitch, where the house has failed to load completely and the stairs are the only thing visible. I stand there. It's like my brain is working overtime to try and make sense of what I'm seeing. My trainer comes and stands next to me, and she just stands there casually, looking at it as if it's the least interesting thing in the world. I ask her what the fuck this thing is doing here, and she just chuckles. Get used to it, rookie. You're gonna see a lot of them. I start to move closer, but she grabs my arm, hard. I wouldn't do that, she says. Her voice is casual, but her grip is tight, and I just stand there, looking at her. You're gonna see them all the time. Don't go near them. Don't touch them. Don't go at them. Just ignore them. I start to ask her about it, but something in the way she's looking at me tells me that it's best if I don't. We end up moving on, and the subject doesn't come up again for the rest of my training. She was right, though. I'd say about every 5th call I go on, I end up running across a set of stairs. Sometimes they're relatively close to the path, maybe within 2 or 3 miles. Sometimes they're 20, 30 miles out, literally in the middle of nowhere, and I only find them during the broadest searches or training weekends. They're usually in good condition. But sometimes it looks like they've been out there for years. All different kinds, all different sizes. The biggest I ever saw looked like they came out of a turn-of-the-century mansion, and were at least 10 feet wide, with steps leading up at least 15 to 20 feet. I've tried talking about it with people, but they give me the same response my trainer did. It's normal, don't worry about it, they're not a big deal. But don't go close to them, or up them. When trainees ask me about it now, I give them the same response. I don't really know what else to tell them. I'm really hoping someday I get a better answer, but it hasn't happened yet. This one's less spooky and more sad. A young man went missing in late winter, when realistically no one should be going that far out onto the trails. We close a lot of them, but some remain open year-round, unless there's a shitload of snow. We didn't opt for him, but we had about 6 feet of snow on the ground. It was an unusually heavy snow year, and we knew it wasn't likely that we'd find him until spring, when the thaw came. Sure enough, when the first big thaw came, a hiker reported a body a little ways off the main trail. We found him at the base of a tree, in the pile of melted snow. I knew right away what had happened, and it scared the living shit out of me. Most of you who ski or snowboard, or spend any amount of time on a mountain, will probably have guessed too. When snow falls, it doesn't collect as thick in areas beneath the branches. It happens most with fir trees, because they have a sort of closed umbrella shape. So what you end up with is a space around the base of the tree that's filled with a mixture of loose, powdery snow, air, and branches. They call them tree wells, and they're not immediately obvious if you don't know what you're looking for. We put up signs in the Welcome Center, big ones, letting people know how dangerous they are. Every year that we get an unusual amount of snow, at least one person doesn't read them, or doesn't take the warning seriously, and we find out about it in the spring. My best guess is that this young man was hiking and got tired, or maybe a cramp from walking in the deep snow. He went to go sit at the base of the tree, not knowing that there was a tree well, and fell in. He got stuck, with his feet up, and the surrounding snow caved in around him, unable to free himself. He suffocated. It's called snow immersion suffocation, and it doesn't usually happen except in really deep snow. But if you get stuck in a weird position, like this guy did, even 6 feet of snow can be lethal. What scared me the most was imagining how he must have struggled. upside down in the freezing cold. He didn't die quickly. The snow would have formed a dense, heavy pile on top of him, and it would have been literally impossible to get out. As it got harder to breathe, he would have known what was happening. I can't even imagine what he was thinking in his last moments. A lot of my less outdoorsy friends want to know if I've ever seen the Goat Man while I've been out on calls. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I've never had anything quite like that happen. I guess the closest was the whole black-eyed man thing, but I didn't see anything. However, there was one call where I had something kind of similar happen, but I'm not sure I'm willing to chalk it up to the Goat Man. We'd gotten a report that an older woman had fainted along one of the trails and needed assistance getting back down to the main area. We hike up to where she's at, and her husband is just beside himself. He runs, well, I guess more jogs to us and tells us that he was a little ways off the trail looking at something when his wife starts screaming behind him. He runs back to her and she's passed out on the trail. We get her on a backboard, and as we're getting her down to the welcome center, she comes to and starts screaming again. I calm her down and ask her what happened. I can't remember verbatim what she said, but essentially what happened was this. She'd been waiting for her husband when she started hearing this really strange sound. She said it sounded sort of like a cat, but it was off somehow, and she couldn't quite figure out why. She went a little ahead to try and hear it better, and it sounded like it was coming closer. She said the closer it got, the more uneasy she was, until she finally figured out what was wrong. I do remember this next part, because it was so weird that I don't think I could forget it if I tried.
It wasn't a cat. It was a man saying the word meow over and over. Just meow, 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 but it wasn't a man. It couldn't have been. I've never heard a man make his voice buzz like that. I thought my hearing aid is gone out, but it wasn't. I adjusted it and it still sounded buzzy. It was awful. He was coming closer, but I couldn't see him. The closer he got, the more scared I was. And the last thing I remembered was a shake coming out of the trees. I guess that's what I fainted.
Now, obviously I'm a little perplexed as to why a guy would be out in the fucking woods chanting meow, meow at people. So, once we get down the mountain, I tell my superior that I'm gonna go search the area to see if I can find anything. He gives me the go-ahead and I grab a radio and hike back to where she fainted. I don't see anyone, so I keep going about a mile more, and when I head back, I go off the trail to see if I can figure out where she saw him coming from. It's almost sunset at this point, and I don't have any desire to be out at night alone, so I just sort of write it off and make a mental note to check it out again tomorrow. But as I'm headed back, I start to hear something in the distance. I stop, and I call out for anyone in the immediate area to identify themselves. The sound didn't come any closer or get louder, but it sounded exactly like a man saying, meow, meow. As comical as it makes it sound, it was almost like that guy on South Park with the electrolarynx. His name's Ned. I go off the trail in the direction I think it's coming from, but I never seem to get closer. It's almost like it's coming from all directions. Eventually, it just sort of fades out, and I ended up going back to the Welcome Center. I didn't get any further reports like that, and even though I went back to the area, I never heard that exact sound again. I suppose it could have been some stupid kid out there fucking with people, but even I have to admit it was weird. So, this kind of turned into a massive wall of text, and for that I apologize. I wanted to get to the stories my friend told me, and he does have some good ones. So I'll post those tomorrow. I also have a few more of my own I think you guys would like. I'm sorry to keep you all in suspense again. Hopefully these stories here make up for it, and help you get through the next 24 hours until I can post again.
Okay, so that is story number 2 from the second journal that was recovered from Raymond Williams, the ex-U.S. Forest Service member. who passed away, and his family found these journals. Now, as the stories go on, you'll start to hear that he starts getting a little worried. He starts to see these stories are gaining attention. This is early internet days. This is the term viral was not invented yet, but these are starting to get popular. It's during that time, someone with a story like this, it's going to be very easy to pinpoint who could be telling this story, and it starts reaching people in the search and rescue field. It starts reaching people he used to work with. It starts reaching families of the missing people. He gets very worried that should he keep continuing to bring these stories because people need to hear them and people want to hear them, but is he putting his own life in danger by telling these stories? Is this something he wants to keep doing? And that's going to be a common theme going forward when I play these stories. People saying, Davey, I'm on the fence. I don't know about what. Get on the stairs. These are just to enjoy. These are, you can totally believe them. You can not believe them. You can think it's gay. You can absolutely love it. Spooky Sundays is going to be a thing going forward. We're going to find bizarre little stories. Some real-life conspiratorial events. Some maybe, more of a storytelling. But we are going to be going forward with this kind of series because I enjoy covering this kind of stuff, and I don't get much time to do this kind of stuff. I would never have a channel specifically, around this. Evelyn says, missing 401 doesn't say the cause of disappearances. And that's part of the mystery. That's part of the mystery. Why we're getting into the character of enjoying the story. I'm not trying to pick it apart for every little thing. I'm trying to have a fun time and have a fun stream. So, you got these mysterious stairs in the forest and of the world. Like I said, there are some that are famous, some that we have no idea why they're there. Surely some of these staircases in the middle of nowhere may have been part of a town, maybe. I don't know, a building that has crumbled for some reason that now has woods growing over it. So how would that work if there couldn't have been that technology as they tell us? However, some of them seem new, almost like someone had put them in there yesterday. Now some stories from these journals started surfacing on Reddit. Floodgates opened up. More and more people that come forward with their own accounts of random stairs in the woods and parks. Then you got like the creepypastas, other phenomenons of storytelling. Became a string of stories recounted from both rangers and the public, mostly across the eastern U.S. Someone was asking if this is a world event, mostly across the U.S. However, soon stories poured in from other nations, including Portugal, Norway, Philippines. As it turns out, mysterious staircases in the forest are not uncommon, and many of them have been around for centuries or millennia. An example would be like, let me see if I can pull this up for you guys. Something like this. Now, something like this. This is the in Bamarzo, Etruscan pyramid. Historically, there are numerous ancient structures with staircases that appear to have been important for various people. And this is in Viterbo, Italy. It's a large stone megalith with stairs that lead to a small platform at the top. Scholars believe the structure dates to the 7th century BCE or before. No one knows what really took place on these steps. However, Etruscans did perform sky-based divinations and sacrifices of animals and people. Could have this been the reason for the tower or the altar? I'm not sure. You guys might know some other staircases that have been out there. I'll try to give you guys a couple examples, and then we'll go right back to the stories. I'm just trying to kind of interrupt the story time. Since I'm here, might as well shoot the shit with you guys about some of these kind of historical ones, if you guys are interested in this part of it. This is called the Mount Nam Kulin in the Cambodian Siem Reap province. A puzzling 2,000-foot long abandoned staircase ascends the mountain, known as Piao Sir. Experts believe the structure dates to sometime between the 9th and 13th century. However, experts aren't sure who built it or why. Perhaps it served as a pathway to reach the ancient, now buried space for workers to acquire building supplies, or was this something more fantastical? Was this something more mythological for them? So that's a couple examples, and after the next story, I'll bring a couple more up. As you see here, we have different pictures that have been taken throughout the years, ever since it became more popular. People notice them more. People find the need for people saying, well, that's a fake story. Well, okay, so now we'll take pictures of them. Back in the chat, someone says I'm late. I don't know why he's not enjoying it. I'm just kidding. I know you're enjoying it. But, yeah, I think more of it is, okay, what was the reason for them building this large, out-of-place set of stairs that doesn't really lead to anything, or having this platform at the top of it? They want to know what rituals they were doing, what they were getting into. What's the reason for modern-day stairs to be in the middle of the woods? He's having a bad day about stairs. Okay, that's enough. All right, so we're going to get on to the third installment of this search and rescue officer, Raymond Williams, who wrote these journals and these blog posts and other posts. And we'll just get into the next story. This one's about 25 minutes long. They seem to get about a minute or two longer each time. So, like I said, I'm going to tell the story around it. I'll give you the history. I'll give you some examples. I'll do everything I can leading up to the story. And then we just kind of play through, because I think interrupting it, there's really no need to interrupt this guy, telling the story. I think it would kind of ruin the mood of it. That's just my opinion. You guys can tell me what you think.
So, to quickly address some of the common questions the majority of you had, I am not comfortable talking about where exactly I work, unfortunately. And in all reality, some of the things I've mentioned here could get me in a lot of trouble or fired. So it's best if I don't discuss it too much. I will say I'm in the United States and in an area that is comprised of a great deal of wilderness. We're talking hundreds of miles of thick forest with a mountain range and a few lakes. There's still a great amount of interest in the stairs. And luckily for you guys, my friend has a story that I think you'll all be very interested in. I'll go into more at the end of this update. As for whether or not I have ever thought of asking my superiors about them, I have, but again, I don't want to risk my job. However, one of my former superiors no longer works as a search and rescue officer, and it's possible that he may be willing to talk to me about it. I'll be speaking to him later in the week, and I'll let you all know what comes of that. As far as advice on becoming a search and rescue officer goes, I think the best advice I can give you is to contact your local Forest Service and see if they offer any training courses, or what the qualifications are. I've been doing this for years, and I've started out as a volunteer helping on search and rescue operations. It's a great job, despite the occasional tragic situations, and I wouldn't want to do anything else. Alright, let's get on with these stories. The first happened on a case that I went on right after I got out of training, and was still pretty new to everything. Before I took this job, I was a volunteer, so I had a basic idea of what to expect. But on those calls, you're mostly dealing with finding lost people after vets have found signs of them. As a search and rescue officer, you go out for all kinds of cases, from animal bites to heart attacks. This case got called in early in the morning from a young couple who were up on one of the trails that goes by the lake. The husband was completely hysterical, and we couldn't really figure out what was going on. We could hear the woman screaming in the background, and he was begging us to come up there right away. When we get there, we see him holding his wife, and she's got something in her arms. She's screaming these awful, almost animal-like screams, and he's sobbing. He sees us, and he screams at us to help them, to please get an ambulance up here. Now, obviously we can't just drive an ambulance up the walking path, so we ask him if his wife needs help, or if she can walk on her own. He's still hysterical, but he manages to tell us that it's not his wife that needs help. I go over while one of the vets tries to calm him down, and I ask the wife what's going on. She's rocking, holding something, and just shrieking over and over. I crouch down and see that whatever she's holding, it's covered with her blood. That's when I noticed the sling on her front, and my heart sinks. I ask her to tell me what's going on, and I sort of pry her arms gently open so I can see what she's holding. It's her baby, obviously dead. His head is caved in on one side, and he's covered in scratches. Now, I've seen dead bodies before, but something about this whole situation hits me hard. I have to take a second to compose myself, and I get up and go get one of the other vets who's standing by. I tell him that it's a dead kid, and he sort of pats my shoulder and tells me he'll deal with it. It took us over an hour to get this woman to let us see her kid. Every time we try to take him from her, she flips out and tells us we can't have him, that he'll be okay if we just leave her alone and let her help him. But eventually one of the vets manages to calm her down, and she gives us the body. We took it back to the med area, but when the EMT showed up, they told us there was never any hope of saving the kid. He died instantly from the trauma to his head. I was good buddies with one of the nurses who met them at the hospital, and she told me later what happened. Turns out, the couple had been walking with the baby in the sling, and they stopped because the kid was fussing. The dad takes the kid and holds him, looking out over this little gully by the path. The mom comes to stand next to him, but she ends up stepping on a loose patch of soil, and she trips. She falls into the dad, who drops the kid, who ends up falling about 20 feet down this little gully onto the rocks. The dad climbed down and recovered the kid, but he'd fallen right on his head and was dead by the time he got there. The baby was only 15 months old. You guys are out fucking camping. Oh, I don't know. It was a total freak accident. A series of events that coalesced into the worst possible outcome. Probably one of the more awful calls I've been on. I haven't seen a lot of animal bites in my time as a search and rescue officer, mostly because there aren't many animals that come around the area. While there are bears in the area, they tend to stay pretty far away from people, and sightings are highly unusual. Most of the animals you'll see are small ones: coyotes, raccoons, skunks. What we do see, frequently, are moose. And let me tell you, moose are nasty fuckers. They'll chase after anything for any reason, and God help you if you get in between a female and its baby. One of the more amusing calls was one guy who'd gotten chased down by an absolutely massive male moose and was stuck up a tree. Took us almost an hour to get him down, and when he was finally on solid ground again, he looks at me and says, "Damn, these fuckers is big up close." Not exactly a scary story, but we still laugh about that one. I honestly don't remember how I've forgotten this story, but it's by far the scariest thing that's happened to me. I guess maybe I've tried so long to forget about it that it just didn't come to mind right away. As someone who spends literally all of their time in the woods, you don't ever want to let yourself get scared of being alone or out in the middle of nowhere. That's when you have experiences like this, and you tend to just forget about them. This is, to date, the only thing that ever made me really seriously consider if this job is the right one for me. I don't really like talking about it much, but I'll do the best I can to remember it all. As I recall, this took place right at the end of spring. It was a typical lost child call. A 4-year-old girl had wandered away from her family's campsite and had been missing for about 2 hours. Her parents were completely despondent and told us what most parents do. My kid would never wander away. She's so good about staying close. She's never done anything like this before. We assure the parents that we'll do everything we can to find her, and we spread out in a standard search formation. I was partnered with one of my good buddies, and we were sort of casually holding conversation while we hiked. I know it sounds callous, but you do sort of become desensitized when you've done this long enough. It becomes the norm, and I think to a certain extent, you have to learn to desensitize yourself in order to work this job. We search for a good 2 hours, going well beyond where we think she'd be, and we come out of a small valley when something makes us both stop, in unison. We freeze, and look at each other. and there's almost a sensation like a plane depressurizing. My ears pop, and I have this odd sensation of having dropped about 10 feet. I start to ask my buddy if he felt that. But before I can, we hear the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. It's almost like a freight train passing directly by us, but it's coming from every direction at once, including above and below us. He screams something to me, but I can't hear him over the deafening roar. Understandably freaked out, we look all around us, trying to find the source of the sound, but neither of us see anything. Of course, my first thought is landslide, but we're not near any cliffs, and even if we were, it would have hit us by now. The sound goes on, and we're trying to yell to each other. But even standing close together, we can't hear anything but this sound. Then, as suddenly as it starts, it stops. Like someone threw a switch and cut it off. We stand there for a second, perfectly still, and slowly the normal sounds of the woods come back. He asks me, what the fuck just happened? But I just kind of shrug, and we stand there looking at each other for a minute. I get on the radio and ask if anyone else just heard the end of the fucking world, but no one else hears it, even though we're all within shouting distance of each other. My buddy and I just sort of shrug it off and keep going. About an hour later, we all check up on our radios, and no one's found the little girl. But most of the time, we won't search when it's dark, but because we don't have any kind of lead on her, a few of us decide to keep going, including me and my buddy. We keep close together, and we're calling out for her every couple of minutes. At this point, I'm hoping beyond hope that we find her, because while I may not like kids, the idea of them being out alone in the dark is awful. The woods can be intimidating to kids in the daylight. At night, well, it's a whole different beast. But we're not seeing any signs of her, or getting any responses, and around midnight, we decide to turn around and head back to the rendezvous point. We're about halfway back when my buddy stops and shines his light to the right of us, into a really thick deadfall, or group of dead trees. I ask him if he's heard a response, but he just tells me to be quiet and listen. I do. And in the distance, I can hear what sounds like a kid crying. We both call the girl's name and listen for any kind of response, but it's just this really faint crying. We head in the direction of this deadfall and go around it, calling her name over and over. As we get closer to the crying, I start getting this weird feeling in my gut, and I tell my buddy that something isn't right. He tells me he feels the same way, but we can't figure out what it is. We stop where we are and call the girl's name again, and at the same time, we both figure it out. The crying is on a loop. It's the same little hitching sob, then wail, then quiet hiccup, repeated over and over. It's exactly the same every time, and without saying another word, we both take off running. It's the only time I've ever lost my composure like that, but something about it was so incredibly wrong, and neither of us wanted to stay out there anymore. When we got back to the rendezvous, we asked if anyone else had heard anything strange, but no one else knew what we were talking about. I know it sounds sort of anticlimactic, but that call fucked me up for a long time. As for the little girl, we never found a trace of her. We kept an eye out for her, and all the other people we'd never found, but frankly, I doubt we'll ever find anything. Of the missing persons calls I've gone out on, only a handful have ever resulted in a complete disappearance, meaning no trace of the person and no body ever found. But sometimes a body just leads to more questions than answers. Here's some of the bodies we've found that have become infamous in our team. A teenage boy whose remains were recovered almost a year after he vanished. We found the top of his skull, 2 finger bones, and his camera almost 40 miles from where he was last seen. The camera, sadly, was destroyed. The pelvis of an older man who had vanished a month earlier. That was all we found. The lower jaw and right foot of a 2-year-old boy on the highest peak of a ridge in the southern part of the park. The body of a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome, almost 20 miles from where she vanished. She had died of exposure 3 weeks after going missing, and all of her clothes were intact, except for her shoes and jacket. There were berries and cooked meat in her stomach when they did the autopsy. The coroner said it appeared as if someone had been taking care of her. There were no suspects ever identified. The frozen body of a 1-year-old baby found a week after vanishing in the hollow trunk of a tree 10 miles from the area he was last seen. There was fresh milk found in his stomach, but his tongue was gone. A single vertebrae and right kneecap of a 3-year-old girl found in the snow almost 20 miles from the campground her family had been at the previous summer. Now on to a couple of stories my friend told me. I mentioned that you were all interested in the stairs, and you're in luck. He'd had a closer encounter with them. Though he doesn't have any explanation for them, he does have a bit more experience with them than I do. My buddy's been a search and rescue officer for about 7 years. He started when he was a junior in college, and he had a very similar experience when he first encountered the stairs.
So we're about to get right back into the stairs. Just wanted to say welcome to a bunch of people that I saw join the stream. I don't want people to come in and think I'm just playing, stories on a loop or something. I'm just not going to interrupt them because you get in the mood of the story, you get what's going on. Figured I'd interject as he's bringing back the stairs. This guy's shtick is good. 401 Canada would be lit. People always disappear. You talking about the guy telling the story? Or the guy that does 411? I think he's been to Canada. Super creepy, Davey. Love it. Where is this? All over the U.S. Hello, Sherry Nicole. Hello, Modus. Hello, Ira. Jan Brennan. Jigaman. Good to see everybody. As far as me covering 411, this will be part 2 of this series, and then next Sunday we'll pick a whole different story. I think Spooky Sundays will be something going forward. Cleo Seeker says hi. 411 guy is the real deal. That's David Polides, who does the investigation, a former police officer. Kneecaps don't fully form until the age of 10 to 12. He's full of it, says Mountain Rogue. Really nitpicking just a cool story. Teddy Spaghetti says, damn it, I'm late. Dead Game says, just popping in, buddy. All the usual suspects are here. Very cool. Yeah, a lot of people are here. Like it. Okay, so like a few more examples of these things, then we'll get right back into story time. Here's a very, very cool picture of the Loretto Chapel staircases. Madame Sherry held lavish parties, and rumors have it that scandalous things went on there. She may have even supplemented her income by operating as a real madam in business with many beautiful ladies. However, when the madam fell into poverty, she abandoned her chateau. In 1962, the castle burned down, and today, only the stairs and part of the foundation remain. Now, there's many urban legends on these staircases. People say this is just a U.S. phenomenon. So, I'll tell you a quick story about one in the Philippines. One of the earliest of all reports, actually. This originated out of the Philippines. Torquik is an experienced ranger and is often tasked with searching for missing people in the local jungles. Hold on one second, guys. This is something that occurs on a regular basis because the jungles and forests in that area tend to be dense and difficult to safely navigate. It was during one of these routine patrols that Torquik claimed that he had found 2 staircases that led deep into the forest. Out of curiosity and to get a higher vantage point of the forest ahead of him, Torquik decided to climb the stairs. The first staircase was a stone structure with decorative carvings. The second staircase looked more like something someone had put there with natural stones. These were in his immediate area. Torky did not see any sign of missing backpackers, but he did see a stray dog that appeared vicious. He hastened forward further up the stairs to avoid the dog. Unsuccessful, he finally returned to civilization. Torky was met with the news that was both unfortunate and baffling all at the same time. When he arrived at the ranger station, he learned that he had been fired from his job. From his perspective, he had been out for a number of hours, but the truth, as told to him, was astonishing. Torky had been out on patrol for 5 years. So what happened on those stairs? Left for a couple hours. Came back. They said he was gone for 5 years. Just a urban legend behind these staircases. And I'll be interrupting with a couple of these stories throughout these search and rescue officers' stories. Just to mix it up a little bit. And then we still got some Missing 411 to go down. The part 2 of Missing 411. But we'll see how much of that we can get to today. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get a good chunk of it. The Fire Squad is very happy. Your Gershon, well, let me know what you find. Okay, that's someone else. The fuck? Oh, Torka, you silly man. Yeah. Well, Torkic, these people don't have the IQ of us European whites, so what can you do? Someone says, oh, far, too far, I get it. Self-ban in progress. Alright. Back to the stairs from the search and rescue officer. This is Raymond Williams, patrolled for the U.S. Forest Service and many search and rescues from 1960 to 1967. What you're hearing are accounts that he gave, that he wrote down in journals and on blogs, and he starts getting more and more worried about his job and that people, he wants to stay anonymous. But he starts to learn as he's telling these stories and writing them and putting them out on the early internet that people are starting to find out who it could be telling these stories, and he starts getting a little nervous. Just another wrinkle to the story to remember.
His trainer told him almost the same thing mine did, which was to never go near, touch, or ascend them. For the first year, he did just that, but apparently his curiosity got the better of him, and on one call, he broke away from the line and went to go check a set of them out. He said they were about 10 miles from the path where a teenage girl had vanished, and the dogs were following a scent. He was on his own, lagging behind the main group, when he saw a set of stairs off to his left. They looked like they were from a new house, because the carpeting was pristine and white. He said that as he got closer, he didn't feel any different or hear any weird noises. He was expecting something to happen, like bleeding from his ears or collapsing, but he got right up next to them and didn't feel anything. The only thing, he said, that was odd was there was absolutely no debris on the steps. No dirt, leaves, dust, anything. And there didn't appear to be any signs of animal or insect activity in the immediate area, which he found very strange. It was less like things were avoiding them, and more like they just happened to be in a relatively barren part of the forest. He touched the stairs, and didn't feel anything except the sort of sticky feeling that you get from a new carpet. Making sure his radio was on, he slowly climbed the stairs. He said it was terrifying, because the way they'd been stigmatized, he wasn't really sure what was going to happen to him. He joked that half of him expected to be teleported to some other dimension, and the other half was watching for a UFO to come swooping down, but he got to the top with little effort. He stood there looking around, but he said the longer he stood at the top step, the more he felt like he was doing something very, very wrong. He described it as a feeling you'd get if you were in a part of the government building you'd no business being in, as if someone was going to come and arrest you, or shoot you in the back of the head at any second. He tried to brush it off, but the feeling got stronger and stronger, and that's when he realized that he couldn't hear anything. The sound of the forest was gone, and he couldn't hear his own breathing. It was like some kind of weird, awful tinnitus, but more oppressive. He climbed back down and rejoined the search, and didn't mention what he'd done, but he said the weirdest part came after. His trainer was waiting back at the welcome center after the search ended for the day, and he cornered my buddy before he could leave. He said his trainer had this look of intense anger, and he asked what was wrong. "You went up them, didn't you?" My buddy said it wasn't phrased like a question. He asked how his trainer knew, and the trainer just shook his head. "Because we didn't find her. The dogs lost her scent." My buddy asked what that had to do with anything. The trainer asked how long he'd been on the stairs, and my buddy said no more than a minute. The trainer gave him a really awful, almost dead-eyed look, and told him that if he ever went up another set of stairs again, he'd be fired immediately. The trainer walked away, and I guess he's never answered any of the questions my buddy has asked him about it since. My buddy's been involved in a lot of missing persons cases where there's never been a trace of them found. I mentioned David Paulides, and my buddy said he can confirm that those stories, for the most part, are accurate. He said that most of the time, if the person isn't found right away, they're either never found, or they're found weeks, months, or years later, in places they can't possibly have gotten to. One story he told me really stood out that involved a 5-year-old boy with a severe mental disability. The little boy vanished from a picnic area in the late fall. In addition to the mental disability, he was also physically handicapped, and his parents explained over and over that he simply could not have vanished. It was impossible. Someone had to have taken him. My buddy said they searched for the kid for weeks, going miles out of the accepted range, but it was like he'd never been there. The dogs couldn't pick up his scent anywhere, not even in the picnic area where he'd apparently vanished from. Suspicion fell on the parents, but it was pretty clear that they were devastated and hadn't done anything sinister to the kid. The search was concluded about a month after, and my buddy said everyone had pretty much forgotten it by later in that winter. He was out on a training op in the snow on one of the higher peaks when he came across something in the snow. He said he saw it from far away at first, and when he got closer, he realized it was a shirt, frozen and sticking part of the way out of the powder. He recognized it as belonging to the kid because it had a distinctive pattern. About 20 yards away, he found the kid's body laying partially buried in the snow. My buddy said there was no way the kid had been dead for any more than a few days, even though he'd been missing for almost 3 months. The kid was curled around something, and when my buddy brushed off the snow to see what it was, he said he almost couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was a big chunk of ice that had been carved crudely to look sort of like a person. The kid was holding it so tight that it had frostbitten his chest and hands, which my buddy could tell even with the decay that had taken place. He radioed the rest of the crew, and they took the body off the mountain. Now, he recapped all of this for me, and to put it simply, there was no way this kid could have both survived for almost 3 months on his own, or have gotten to this peak. There was no physical way this child could have walked almost 50 miles and ended up on top of a goddamn mountain. To top it off, there was nothing in this kid's stomach or colon. Nothing. Not even water. It was like my buddy said. The kid had been taken off the face of the earth, put in suspended animation, and dropped on this mountain months later, only to die of exposure. he's never gotten over that one. The last story of his I'll share occurred fairly recently, only a few months ago. They were out doing a recon for mountain lions because there had been several reports of sightings in the last couple of days. One of our jobs is to scout the areas where these animals are seen to ensure if they're in the area, we can warn people and close off those trails. He was out on his own in a very heavily forested part of the park towards dusk when he heard what sounded like a woman screaming in the distance. Now, as most of you know, when a mountain lion screams, it sounds almost exactly like a woman being brutally murdered. It's unsettling, but far from abnormal. My buddy radioed back and let Ops know he'd heard one, and that he was going to keep going to see if he could figure out where its territory started. He heard the mountain lion scream a couple more times, always from the same spot, and determined the approximate area of the mountain lion's territory. He was about to head back when he heard another scream, this time within only a few yards of him. Of course he freaks out and starts headed back at a much faster pace because the last thing he wants is to run into a goddamn mountain lion and get mauled to death. As he got back on the path and started heading back, the screaming followed him, and he broke into a jog. When he was about a mile from Ops, the screaming stopped, and he turned around to see if it was following him. It was almost night by this point, but he said in the distance, just before the path rounded a corner, he could see what looked like a male figure. He called out to them, warning them that the paths were closed and that he needed to come back to the welcome center. The figure just stood there, and my buddy started to walk over. When he was about 10 yards away, the figure took, as he described, an impossibly long step towards him and let out the same scream my buddy had been hearing. My buddy didn't even say anything. He just turned and sprinted back to Ops, never looking behind him. And by the time he got back, the screaming had moved back into the woods. He didn't mention it to anyone else, just said that there was a mountain lion in the area, and that they would need to close those paths until the animal could be located and moved. I'm gonna end all of this here, since it's turned into another huge wall of text. I'm going to be heading out on a yearly training op tomorrow morning, so I'll be gone until early next week. I'll be meeting with a lot of former trainers and buddies who work in the areas of the park, and I'll be asking them about any stories they'd like to share.
Okay, so that ends the third installment from the journal. I'm just going to give a few more examples of some some kind of urban legends behind this, and then we'll get into the fourth installment of the staircases. I think the staircases is going to dominate this stream. I think as far as going into the beginning of Missing 411 should be held for another spooky Sunday, because there is a 27-minute story and a 17-minute story left to go. So that gives us basically another hour of this stream with me coming on and telling these other stories. So I think, that'll be a good chunk of information for these staircases. Because if someone comes in for Missing 411, they're going to be inundated with these stories. And I don't think starting 2 hours into a stream would be good for the beginning and the kind of characteristics you need for a Missing 411 that I'm going to explain to everybody and really break it down. So that'll be its own stream, I believe. So let's move on to this, something called the Vanishing Staircase. These are just a couple urban legends I came across in my research, and this was a story that came from a man. Now, he claims to work at the CDC, an infectious disease specialist. He said in the 1940s, after the Roswell crash, reports of animal mutilations were surfacing all around. You guys may have heard of these before. They would find incisions on these, usually horses or cows, and the organs would be removed, but it would be a clean cut on them. Now, the CDC was called in to assist in the investigation, which was supposed to last like 1 or 2 weeks, but it ended up lasting about 6 months. During that time, various people working in the field reported weird stares that were giving some type of frequency off of them. They stationed their campsite about 30 meters away from the stairs and spent the night. When they woke up, the stairs moved. On the ground where the staircases had been was a dark black spot that appeared burnt. Although the investigators determined that the stairs emitted a frequency, they couldn't figure out why or who could have been receiving it. 6 days later, stairs just vanished. Got a story out of Sweden. Another tale about a staircase in the woods involves 2 Swedish students who were out hiking. Axel and Isaac had been traveling for miles and presumably hours when they came across a staircase in that clearing miles away from anywhere. Both puzzled, but they couldn't agree about what to do. Axel wanted nothing at all to do with the stairs, while Isaac was much more daring. He wanted to climb them, and did so. The instant he reached the top, both youths, that's a term for blacks, both kids, heard a blood-curdling, shrill scream that was sufficient enough to make them flee the scene. Eventually, they stopped running and recovered their breath. That was when someone put a hand on Axel's shoulder. Assuming it to be Isaac, he glanced backward. Isaac stood behind him at a considerable distance, much too far to be within arm's reach. Whoever, or whatever, was responsible for the touch, Axel recalled that it felt cold. So we'll have a few more of those coming forward, but I think we're going to dive right back into the stories. Jack says like a literal staircase, like made out of wood. Here would be a few examples. Some old ones from castles, some wooden ones that spiral up, stone with a wooden handrail, more modern ones like they were just built and left, or some modern household for some reason is growing in the woods with the trees, little metal ones, tons of different examples. Stairs leading to nowhere, a stairway to heaven, a stairway to hell. It is a stairway to nowhere. They don't seem scary, someone says. Well, if you're not scared, they're not scary. That's how you gotta look at it. So we will move on.
Back from my...
So part 4, he had just went on a year-long search and rescue training course, and he said, the people I'm meeting with are probably going to have some stories, and he has a stairway to Israel. Comment of the night. I don't have any thing to hand out for prizes, but when I do, that is the comment of the night. We will, I was thinking about buying some shirts, I'm going to buy them. Like, I'm not asking for anybody to pitch in for this. I'm going to buy some shirts and design maybe 10 to 15, and then slowly but surely, whatever that costs, and then slowly but surely just, send them out to random people. We'll come up with some reason why I'd be sending them out as far as, comment of the night, or just, we'll figure it out how that's going to work. It's going to have nothing to do with donations, nothing to do with money or anything like that. It's going to be simply just cool, fun, hanging out, and we'll come up with reasons as to why I'd be sending them to someone. And then if they become popular, we'll think about how much they cost and all that shit. I'm not worried about starting a shirt business, but I think it'd be cool to have a limited number of them out. Just an idea. This will probably be towards the first of the year. I'm talking to Bally Song, or I'm going to reach out to him to see if he wants to do some artwork, figure out the price of that, come up with a new logo design, and we'll go forward. I'll tell you guys what's going on with that. But that's interrupting. Brandon Jerome says, where did all the Tartarians go? We've done some dLive streams on them, actually, so those streams have disappeared, but that is a topic that will be for Spooky Sundays. Throughout the week and all other streams are totally different than what we're doing today. If there's anyone new here, we usually don't cover this kind of stuff. I mean, we do in a way, but specifically dedicating a stream to Missing 411 really isn't something I do, but I like this idea of having these spooky stories and weird anomalies throughout history for our Sunday streams. One of our Sunday streams, we already streamed earlier. We might do an Epstein Files later on tonight. I have the Amazon spying stream ready to go. I have a bunch of streams ready for you guys, so I hope you guys are enjoying them and you're having a good time as I am. Now we're an hour and a half in. Got 120 people in the chat ever since we hit 110. we've stayed at that concurrent number. So I gotta say thank you guys. Seems like you enjoy these stories. Now this next installment of him coming back from the year away, again, we're talking about Raymond Williams. He was a U.S. Forest Service member who died in the late 90s, mysteriously, I might add. They never found out the exact reason behind his death. His family cleaned out his stuff and noticed stuff saved on the computer, blog posts that went out, journals written about all of these people, all these missing person accounts. So we're 4 in now. Let's start here.
Back from my training op, and I heard a lot of interesting stories from other search and rescue officers. I'll assign the initials of those officers to their stories. First up is KD. KD is a vet who's been a search and rescue officer for about 15 years. She specializes in high-elevation mountain rescues and is widely considered one of the best in her field. She was one of the more enthusiastic storytellers, and since we were together a fair amount of time during exercises, she ended up telling me about 4 that really stuck with me. The first, she told me in response to my asking about her most traumatic calls. She shook her head and told me that really bad calls happen more frequently on the mountain since the potential for nasty accidents is higher. About 5 years ago, one of the parks she worked at had a string of disappearances. It was a bad year, she said, one of the worst on record as far as the weather went. There was getting about a foot of snow every couple of days, and there were a few avalanches that killed some climbers. They'd warn people about staying on mapped areas, but of course, there's always those who don't listen. In one particularly nasty case, an entire family got wiped out because the father decided he knew better than the officials, and he took them out into an area that wasn't safe. They were snowshoeing, and as best KD could figure, they walked into a shelf of snow that looked solid, but actually wasn't. It gave way, and this family went ass over tea kettle almost 300 feet down a slope. They landed on the rocks at the bottom, and the parents died instantly. One of the kids did as well, but the other 2 survived. One had a broken leg and fractured ribs. The other was almost unharmed, save for some bruising and a sprained ankle. The uninjured child left his sibling behind and went out to find help. KD said the kid didn't make it more than half a mile before a storm overtook him. Kid stopped to try and get warm, or maybe just to rest, and ended up freezing to death. They ended up finding the family with the help of some witnesses who saw them headed out into the wilderness. And she was the one to find the kid who'd frozen to death looking for help. She said it had started to snow, just enough to obscure long-distance vision, but not enough to make searching impossible. She saw a figure sitting in the snow up ahead, and she got to it as quickly as possible. She described in detail how, as she got closer, she realized first that it was a child, second, that they were deceased, and third, that they had frozen in one of the most pitiful positions she'd ever found a corpse in. The kid was sitting upright, with his knees tucked up against his chest. His arms were curled around him, and his head was tucked up in his coat. When she moved the coat to look at his face, she saw that he'd died crying. His face was twisted, and the tears were frozen on his cheeks. She said it was painfully obvious that this kid was terrified when he succumbed to hypothermia, and as a mother, it broke her heart. She told me repeatedly that she hopes the father is burning in hell as we speak. The other traumatic story she told me that stood out was one that happened when she was a rookie. Her team got a report of an experienced climber who hadn't come home the previous day. His wife was convinced that something bad had happened because he'd never failed to come home on time. They went out looking for him and had to climb what sounded like some very technically challenging parts of the mountain. They got to a relatively flat area, and Katie started seeing blood in the snow. She followed the trail, and as she went, she started seeing little bits of tissue. She wasn't sure exactly what body part it had come from, but the farther she followed it, the more there was. She follows this blood and tissue trail to a sheltered area under a cliff face. Then she finds a climber. She said there was so much blood, more than she'd ever seen before. He was lying face down, one arm outstretched in front of him, as if he died crawling. She looks closer and sees that he's been partially disemboweled, which is where the tissue she'd seen had come from. The guy had an ice pick tucked into a hip holster, and it's covered in blood. Of course, they'll never be sure exactly what happened, but she said as best she can figure out, the guy had been attempting to climb up to the next area, and had been using his axe to ascend. He probably hit a loose patch and had fallen. On the way down, or possibly when he landed, he'd gotten impaled by the axe, and it had disemboweled him. He drug himself along, tearing pieces of himself out as he went, and had died under the cliff face. She isn't terribly bothered by gore, but I guess a few other guys who came to help remove the body threw up when they turned him over, and a good portion of his intestines spilled out. At some point I mentioned to her that I was interested in hearing about experiences where people completely disappeared. Her eyes lit up, and she leans in close to me.
"Want to hear a doozy?"
She asks. She tells me about how, when she first started, there was a case that got a lot of attention in the media. A family had been out berry picking in an area of the forest very close to the entrance of the park. They had 2 little boys, both under the age of 5, and at some point during the day, one of them vanishes. There's an absolutely massive search, and they find absolutely nothing. It's another one of those cases where it's like the kid was never there in the first place. The dogs just sit down and don't pick up on anything. No trace of the kid is found. The search goes on for about 2 months, but is eventually called off. Fast forward to 6 months later, the family comes back to place flowers at the memorial that's been set up there for the kid. They bring their other son. While they're placing the flowers, they lose sight of the kid about 3 seconds. And in that time, he vanishes into thin air. Now, obviously the parents are beyond devastated. It's awful enough to lose 1 child, but to lose 2 is beyond imagining. The search is huge, one of the largest in state history. There are about 300 volunteers combing every inch of this park looking for this kid. But again, there's no trace of him. The search goes on for about a week, with people looking miles from the part of the park he vanished from. And then, almost 2 weeks later, a volunteer almost 15 miles from the designated search area radios that he's found the kid. They assume the kid is dead, but the volunteer says he's not only alive, he's in good shape. Katie and her team go out to recover the kid, and when they get there, she can't believe that this is the kid that's been missing. His clothes are clean, there's no dirt on him anywhere, and he doesn't appear traumatized. The volunteer says he found the kid sitting on a log, playing with a little twig bundle that's bound together with some rope. KD asks him where he's been, who he was with for those 2 weeks, and the kid tells her that he's been with the Fuzzy Man. Now, KD firmly believes in Bigfoot, so she gets all excited and asks what he means by fuzzy. Was he hairy? But the kid says no, he wasn't hairy. He was a fuzzy man. And he describes a man that's blurry, like when you close your eyes, but not all the way closed. He says the man...
Shout out to Adam Courier. $10 donation through Streamlabs. No message. Appreciate that, buddy. If anyone wants to support the show, if you want to do that, you can do so through PayPal, Streamlabs. Those links are in the description as well as the chat. Don't worry, just hanging out is more than enough. Appreciate having you guys here. So, very cool. We're going to move on to the rest of the story. Like I said, there's about 19 minutes left in this journal entry. We can do theories after this. We get talk missing 411. We can get into a couple more examples of some urban legends. Urban, that's a word. And I think, yeah, that's a good start for what we're going to do. So I see people are putting a lot of stories in the Discord. I appreciate that. So we're going to finish this journal entry because he gets into a lot of weirdness here. Just want to say thanks to Adam Courier. Appreciate that, buddy.
Came out of the trees and took the kid deep into the woods. The kid says he slept in a hollow tree and the fuzzy man gave him berries to eat. Katie asks if the man was mean, if he scares the kid, and the kid says no, he wasn't scary, but I didn't like how he didn't have eyes. Katie says they get the kid back to headquarters and a cop takes him back into town to talk to him more about what happened. She's friends with the cop that talked to him, and she said that the kid described being kept in this tree by the fuzzy man and given berries whenever he was hungry. He was allowed to wander around a very specific clearing, but when he tried to go further, the fuzzy man would get mad and yell real loud, even though he didn't have a mouth. When the kid got scared at night, the fuzzy man made it go brighter and gave him the twig bundle. He said the fuzzy man was going to keep him, but he had to let him go because the kid wasn't the right kind. He either can't or won't elaborate more on that. The cops are just sort of left scratching their heads, and the search for his brother is renewed with no results. The kid has no idea where his brother might be, and they never find him. The last story Katie told me was of something that happened to her when she got separated from her training group when she was a rookie. They were learning the basics of high elevation belaying on a well-mapped side of a mountain, and she had to use the bathroom. She went off about 50 yards from the group during a meal break and did her business. I'll tell the rest exactly as she told it to me. So I go to take a piss, and once I'm done, I start going back to the group. But I've only gotten about 5 feet when I realize that I have no idea where I am. And this wasn't I got turned around lost. I mean, I had literally no fucking clue where I was. If you asked me, I don't even think I'd have been able to tell you what state I was in. I was sort of how I imagine people with amnesia feel, you know? You're completely lost and you have no idea what to do. So I just stood there for a while, just trying to figure out where the fuck I was and what I was supposed to do. But the longer I stood there, the more confused and turned around I get, so I start walking. As I recall, I just picked a random direction and went for it. And as I'm walking, it's just getting worse and worse, to the point where I have no concept of why I am on the mountain in the first place. I'm just trudging through the snow, and then I start hearing this voice. It's kind of inside my head, almost. Like, if a frog could talk, all low and croaky, and it's telling me over and over, it's okay, it's okay. You need to find something to eat. Find something to eat and you'll be okay. Just keep walking and find something to eat. 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 So I start looking around for anything that I can eat, and I swear to God, I've never felt that hungry in my life. It was bottomless, and I think I'd have eaten just about anything you put in front of me then. I had no concept of time, so I had no idea how long I'd been out there, when I hear an actual voice coming towards me. I go towards it and see one of the other search and rescue officers, and he looks fucking terrified. He's running towards me, asking if I'm okay and what the hell I'm doing out here. And the scary thing was, as he's running to me, I kind of see myself reaching into my belt for my hunting knife. I'm not even really thinking about what I'm doing, but what I'm thinking is I have to eat. If I don't eat, I'll never be okay again, so I just have to eat. He sees me doing that and he backs away. He yells at me to put my knife away, that he's not going to hurt me, and that kind of snaps me back. All of a sudden I know exactly where I am and I put my knife away. I run to him and ask him how long I've been gone, thinking he'll tell me I've been gone half an hour or so. But he tells me I've been gone for 2 fucking days. I've gone over 2 peaks and ended up almost on the other side of the mountain, and if I kept going, I would have ended up wandering into about 300 miles of wilderness. They'd never have found me. He can't believe I'm not dead, and of course I don't know what the fuck to think. To me, no time has passed at all. I don't say anything. I just go back with him to a rendezvous point, and I'm taken back to headquarters to be airlifted to a hospital. When I get there, they do all kinds of tests and try to figure out what happened, and as best they can guess, I have some kind of weird fugue state, which is a kind of amnesia, or weird seizure, that knocked my brain out of whack. But the truth is that we don't really know. It's never happened again, but I'll tell you, ever since then, I never go out there alone. People rag on me for making them come when I have to leave the group, but I just tell them that listening to me piss in the snow is better than losing me for the 2 fucking days on a freezing mountain. The next person I spoke with was EW, a former trainer who now works as an EMT. He still comes to ops like this to help out, but doesn't work full-time for us anymore. He specialized in finding lost kids. He just seemed to have a sixth sense when it came to knowing where they'd gone. He's a legend among the more senior veterans, but he gets embarrassed if you compliment him too much on his work. He sat down with me at dinner one evening, and we ended up swapping stories. Most of them were just casual, but when we got on the subject of the weirder calls, I mentioned that I had a friend who'd gone.
And most recently, a couple years ago, a woman disappeared.
He got kind of quiet and asked me if he'd heard of a little boy who disappeared from his park a few years back. I hadn't. So he told me this story. They were out looking for this 11-year-old boy, Joey, who'd gone missing near a river. Of course, the first thought was that he'd fallen in and drowned, but when they brought dogs out, they led search and rescue officers away from the river and up into a very densely forested area. When we do searches for people, we search in a grid pattern, and we search every box of the grid incredibly thoroughly. What EW's team noticed right away was that a very strange pattern was emerging. Dogs in alternate boxes were picking up Joey's scent, but losing it when they overlapped with another box. If you think of a checkerboard, Joey's scent was being picked up in random black squares, but never in red. This, of course, didn't make any sense, because how could the kid bounce from area to area without leaving a scent in each place he passed? EW and his partner pass into a new box of the grid, and EW notices a set of stairs about 50 yards away. He tells his partner that they need to go check near it, but his partner flat out refuses. He tells EW that he's made it a point never to go near any stairs he sees, and that while it may be routine, he's not to pretend that it's normal. He tells EW that he'll wait in sight while EW checks. EW says he was irritated, but he felt for the guy and didn't push him on the subject. I walked over to the stairs. They were small, kind of like stairs into a basement. I don't really feel strongly one way or the other about them. The stairs, I mean. So I wasn't scared or anything. I guess I'm like everyone else, and I just prefer not to think about them too much. Anyway, I went over, and I could see that there was something lying on the bottom step, sort of curled up. My heart sinks, because of course, you always hope for the best. And we were confident that we'd find this kid alive, because he'd only been missing for a few hours. But I knew right away that it was him, and that he was dead. He was curled up in a little ball on the step, holding his stomach. It looked like he'd been in horrible pain when he died, but I didn't see any blood, except some on his lip and chin. I radioed in that I'd found him, and we got his body back to command. That poor family. They were devastated. The parents couldn't understand how he'd be dead, because he'd only gone for such a short amount of time. And on top of that, we didn't have any obvious cause of death, which just made it worse. I figured he'd probably eaten something poisonous, since he was holding his stomach when I found him, but I didn't want to guess. It's hard enough to hear your kid is dead, let alone have some stupid search and rescue guy guessing about what happened. They took him away, and I went home, and I tried not to think about it. I hate finding dead kids, man. I loved this job, but it's one of the reasons I left. I've got 2 daughters, and the thought of losing them just... He choked up a little here. I'm not great with emotional stuff like that, and it's always sort of awkward to see a grown man cry, so I didn't really know what to do. He pulled himself together eventually, though, and he kept talking. We don't always hear back from the coroners about cause of death. It's not really our job to know, I guess. And sometimes if they think it's foul play, they won't tell us because of legal bullshit. But I've got a friend who works for the sheriff's department, and he'll usually pass along any interesting info if I ask. In this case, though, I actually got a call from him about a week later. He asks if I remember the kid, and of course I do. And he says some seriously weird shit is going on. He tells me, EW, man, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but the coroner has no idea what happened to this kid. He's never seen anything like it. My friend goes on to tell me that when the coroner opened this kid up, he couldn't even believe what he was seeing. The kid's organs were like Swiss cheese. Quarter-size holes were punched clean through about every single organ this kid had, aside from his heart and lungs. But his colon, his stomach, his kidneys, and even one of his testicles were full of clean holes. My friend said the coroner described it as if someone had taken a hole punch and punched holes out of everything. They were so neat, but the kid didn't have a scratch on him, no entry or exit wounds. The closest anyone there had ever seen like it was a guy who'd filled himself with a buckshot a year or so back while cleaning his rifle. No one had a clue what could possibly have caused it. My friend asked me if I'd ever seen or heard of anything like that, or if we'd had a similar case in the past, but I'd never ever heard of something like that, and I told him I wasn't going to be of any help to him. As far as I know, the coroner determined the cause of death as something like massive internal bleeding, but no one knows what really happened. I've never been able to forget that kid. I have nightmares about it sometimes. I don't let my kids go into the woods alone, and when we go together, I never let them out of my sight. I used to love it out there, but that case and a couple of others just sort of ruined it for me. Dinner was over, so we started to clean up and go back to our cabins. Before we went our separate ways, he put his hand on my shoulder and looked at me really close. He tells me that there's bad things out there. Things that don't care if we have families or lives, or that we can think or feel. He tells me to be careful, and he walks away. I didn't have a chance to talk with him again, but the story stuck with me.
Andy says, very cool. Finjiri, aliens are demons. Yep. Splitting through the veil. I am one with that theory as well. Someone says, oh, Amanda says, I used to think mice ate holes in the Swiss cheese. I think they do. I would walk up those stairs, could not be worse than here. People seem to like the Swiss cheese comment. Courtney Love has caused such shotgun wounds. Yeah, I think he was just drugged up and fucking killed himself. But it's a good little mystery.
By pure coincidence, I got to speak with another veteran, PB, who's been in search and rescue for years.
So this will be the last little piece of the journal entry, about 5 minutes. And then from there, we're going to talk a little missing 411. Kind of exactly, kind of what we're talking about here. What is the theory behind missing 411? What are some of the theories they've come up with? Because these staircase stories kind of bleed into missing 411 a little bit, so I think that'll honestly work for this as well. Make sure I got all my links in order. Went a little further with the staircases than I thought, but that actually works out very well. So let me get back to this story.
We were partnered on a grid sweep during a training exercise, and we were chatting casually about how we liked the job, what kinds of things we'd seen, and the like. At one point, we passed an old set of stairs, though these were probably from an old fire lookout, given the area that we were in. I sort of casually mentioned that I was curious about the stairs, and that I wished I knew more about them. He got kind of quiet, and looked like he wanted to tell me something, but he wasn't sure if he should. Finally, He told me to turn my radio off. Obviously, this is something we are never, ever supposed to do. But I did it, and he did the same. 7 years ago, he tells me, he was out on a call with a rookie. They were in an area of the park that had gotten a lot of strange reports and events. Disappearances, stories about lights in the forests, odd noises, shit like this. The rookie was totally spooked. Kept going on about things out in the woods. According to PB, the guy wouldn't stop talking about Goat Man. Just on and on. Goat Man this, Goat Man that. Finally, I told him that there was plenty else to be afraid of out here. That was very real, and that he'd better get over this thing with the Goat Man. The rookie wanted to know the types of things I was talking about, and I told him to shut up and walk. We crested a little ridge, and there was a staircase about 10 yards ahead. The rookie stops dead in his tracks, and just stands there looking at him. I tell him, see, that's something you should be afraid of. The rookie asks me what the hell these are doing out here, and for some reason, I just open up and tell him the truth. Or what I've been told is the truth. I could have gotten in a lot of trouble for doing what I did, and I could get in a lot of trouble for repeating it to you, but you're a nice kid, and I want you to stop looking into this. Quit while you're ahead. So I'll tell you what I know, under the condition that you never breathe a word of this to the Supes. I told him I wouldn't say a word, and he double checks that our radios are off. When I first started out, we were a little less tight-lipped about them, and the other things that happen out here. We warned people before they were even hired that there was weird shit going on. I guess the Forest Service was tired of having such a massive turnover rate, and they wanted people to know what they were getting into. So they started having people sign these agreements that they wouldn't go to the media about what they were going to see. The Forest Services didn't want to scare people away, so the last thing they needed were spooked rookies running off to the media with stories of ghosts and haunted staffs. But eventually, they found that the agreements weren't necessary. People not only didn't want to talk about what they saw, they wouldn't. A few times, media talked to the people when the kids or hikers would disappear, and no one would say a word. I can't really explain it. I guess we just don't really want to admit anything is wrong. This is our job, to be out in the woods every single day. We don't need to be spooked, and the best way to avoid that is to pretend like everything's okay. So I'll tell you everything I can think of, and after that, I'm done talking about it for good, and I expect you not to bring it up around me, ever. The stairs have been out here as long as the parks have existed. We have records going back decades describing them. Sometimes people go up them when nothing happens. Other times... Look, I really don't like talking about this, but sometimes really bad shit happens. I saw one guy get his hand sliced clean off when he got to the top step. He reached out to touch a tree branch and it happened so fast. 1 second his hand was there, and the next it was gone. Completely clean wound. We didn't find his hand, and the guy almost died. Another time, a woman touched one of the stairs, and a blood vessel in her brain exploded. Literally exploded, like a water balloon. She sort of stumbled down and came over to me, and all she got out was, "I think something is wrong with me." She dropped like a sack of flour, dead before she hit the ground. I'll never forget the way the blood leaked into the inside of her eye. Before she died, I watched it turn red. I watched it happen, and there wasn't a single thing I could do to help. We warn people not to go anywhere near them, but there's always at least one idiot who does. And even if nothing happens to them, something bad always happens. Kids go missing as we're on their trail. Someone dies the next day, cut in half in a completely safe part of the park. I don't know why, but something bad always happens. I don't know exactly why they're out there, but it doesn't matter. They're here, and if we're smart, we tell our new officers exactly what they're capable of.
That's how the journal entries end for now. Very, very awesome. Spooky shit. Now, some people are going to be very skeptical, say, not into it. you can still listen for entertainment value. That's the good part of these spooky Sundays. Even if you're not into it, if you're not 100% into it, you can still have a good listen as, just entertainment value. I'm going to get rid of a couple of links here. Now, I think we're just going to get into some theories and just a little bit to wrap up the stream on what we talked about. I think the stairs is a very cool story. There's a lot of urban legends. I've heard accounts of abandoned stairs in the forest, national parks, some stuff from park rangers who were training. And you hear about it a lot in these training exercises, and they're telling them about what happens on the job. Rangers tell their rookies about their own experience. I remember this one guy, he found these lone staircases in the woods. They thought it was weird. Nonetheless, the man climbed to the top, held out his hand to grab a branch tree. I thought that was a very cool story, how they talked about that. They talk about the injuries of the lady with the brain, fatal aneurysms, and they tell you to not go near these things. If you guys want a little more history on these, I'm going to share some links with you guys in the chat. You guys can go down these rabbit holes. It looks like my Discord is being filled up with... oh, shit. Alright. I guess my Discord is being filled up with... What am I trying to say? A bunch of links to, like, bridges and shit. Which is new to me. Bridges that go nowhere. That's a new one. I accidentally X'd out of my live stream tab, so I gotta just pop it back on so I can get to the chat here. Hope Xing it out doesn't fuck things up, but I don't think that's how it works. If it does, then that sucks. Give me like 20 seconds for this to open back up. I'm not live streaming. Just want to get to my live stream page. Dude, I got hit with like 5 copyrights for that stream earlier. How annoying is that? I don't even care about the money. It's just annoying. And now they're coming out with this thing of you got to tell the thing if you're marketing to kids, and if you don't, your channel gets removed. Guys, I can't sign out of this channel. If I sign out of this channel, I might not be able to get back in. So I don't know how I'm going to tell them I'm on Crocko 3 and Crocko Show that I'm not, marketing to kids. So they might just take those channels away from me. Because if I sign out of Davey Crocko 2, it'll be like the last time where I can't get in for 2 months. I just luckily got in someday. I don't know how I did it. It just showed up. So someone said Kelly is nice. Kelly is nice says that's how I found you. How'd you find me? I missed part of the chat because I was not here. If you guys are into the missing 411 stuff, let me pull up. Let me pull this up. I can share with you guys. We did like 3 hours last week talking about this. I think it was on Davey Crocko 3. I'm not 100% sure because I get kicked from so many channels and go up on another channel. But I'm pretty sure it was over there. Some of you guys were here last week for sure. Maybe it was on this channel. No, it was on this channel then. Let's see. 1.7 thousand subs over here now. Oh yeah, here we go. Project Camellia, Touchless Torture, and Missing 411. About 1,000 views on that. Here's the link to that. We did about 3 hours of Missing 411. Yes, December they'll shut it down. Yeah, most likely. I mean, this channel should be good because I was able to go into my settings and say not for kids. But the other channels, I can't sign in right now because I'm worried I won't be able to get back into this. They're all under different emails and shit. Yeah, so I don't want to risk losing this channel trying to sign into another one. And on my mobile device, I'm not... If I get a new phone, I guess I might be able to do it on mobile. My mobile device won't let me change even Google accounts. Like, it's just a blank screen when I open it up because they've deleted Google accounts and shit. So I think I got a little bit on theories, but I don't know how this actually works. I only listened to a little bit of this, so let me see how this video starts off.
Appeared, I believe it was in Arkansas, and she was eventually found, and she said for 3 days, I knew that there were people behind bushes that were watching me the entire time. And they didn't help me, and I walked up to them sometimes and tried to talk to them, but they wouldn't talk to me.
My 2-year-old son, we can't find him.
How long has he been missing?
Around 4.
There was a hunter in Colorado that contacted me a couple years ago, and he was hunting for elk at about 10 or 11,000 feet up in northern Colorado.
I'm just trying to get to the theories portion of this. I gotta find exactly which one it is. Let me see here.
System as far as the number of disappearances. To date in North America, we've established 52 clusters of missing people in national parks and national forests throughout North America. The biggest cluster in the world of missing people, Yosemite National Park. So to this point,
So here's the map of the clusters of missing 411, and we all open a private window in your browser to log into another account without logging out of the one you use now. So I'm a retard. That's a smart person that knows how to do things. So like an incognito window, it shouldn't have any history or any back history to know of. Delete my browser history if that's the case, if I've ever signed into YouTube there. And then just log into another one. See, this is why I need smart people around like Drummer. Make sure you guys are subbing to Drummer828. He's got a cool little channel. Not little, but cool channel. I mean, mine's a little channel. He's got a cool channel. And I'm sure we'll link up one of these days. Very cool dude. So it's weird how I found his channel too. Just out of the most strangest thing of like, what do you cover? Monograph one day? It's like, this fucking Monograph comes out of nowhere. If you guys know who Monograph is. And it's just like, where the fuck did this guy go? And I see his channel. Oh, man. You like this shit? Yeah, this shit's cool, man. About 2 hours into this. We're about wrapping up now, but I did one last week. We're going to do like a Sunday, just different from what I normally do. I mean, you guys know what I do normally. So like on Sundays, I want to do these kind of weird coast-to-coast style stories. I'm going to set them up real nice like we did today with the George Knapp intro, the music, the stories. Some of the theories behind Missing 411 you get from Bigfoot to portals opening, another dimension. Could be a cult out there. Could be people, families, disposing of their own children. Could be, people just going crazy out in the middle of nowhere. They say when it gets cold, they might start taking off their clothes because they go through this paradoxical thing. So there's a lot of theories behind this, and not one holds water next to the other one. All of them could be just as fantastical. Bigfoot or a portal opening. Either one could be, crazy to somebody or just like, well, that's bizarre, but it could happen. You know what I mean? And you got to have an open mind for these kind of things. But again, here's the link to what we did last week where we covered 411. Today was Staircases in the Woods. We did Project Chameleon last week, some of the cloaking devices the government has, and they were spying on the one dude. Touchless torture we talked about. And I think that about does it. If you guys got any questions in the chat before we leave, I mean, I'll definitely stick around for a minute. This is a story I want to find the audio of. It's the Charles McCuller story. This is a good missing 411 story. I've heard it told by David Paulides, but some of these streams are like 2-3 hours of an interview. So to pick out a story, you got to do a lot of listening and finding. So I'll have that ready for next time we do it. Drummer says, great stream. Oh, thanks, dude. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Andy says, that was all very interesting. Thank you. I missed your 411 live stream. I need to go back. I was told there would be punch and pie. Someone lied to you. You've been lied to, Mountain Rogue, and I'm sorry about that. We have bad actors. Warfus says, download Opera, see if it performs better for you. I don't know what that is. Mountain Rogue, you were told wrong. Have a good one. Neon, friend of the channel, says, fantastic stream. Good to see everyone. Teddy Spaghetti says, thanks, Davey. Really? Okay, guys. I can't inundate myself with that much love. It's, I can't handle this well. Free hat, free hat. I'm going to do the shirts. There'll be free shirts for comments of the night. Bowman had it, though. Stairways to Israel was the comment of the day by Brian Bowman. A round of applause for Mr. Bowman. Very nice. We appreciate that. The Stairways to Israel. Adam Courier with the one donation for the stream, $10. Very appreciated, buddy. Thank you. If anybody else wants to support the show during, you can do it through Streamlabs, support it after, through PayPal. Leave a message if you do that so I know who it is, and I can actually say something back. Usually they give me your email, so I write back anyways, but it's nice to know who I'm talking to, because usually the email is different than your actual name. Oh, there's Adam. Thanks, buddy. So I'm going to share this story, this link to the Charles McCullough story. I think you guys will like reading that. Who knows? They might take the channel down. This will be somehow hate speech, talking about missing persons. Out of all the things I talk about, they'll take me down for this one. The one thing I do like about it is these aren't they're going fucking crazy with the copyrights lately. Any small clip you play, their algorithm's right on it. It's not like it used to be. So I think I got hit on Davey Crocko 3 for a 50-second clip, 90-day stream ban. Crocko Show was a 44-second clip, 90-day stream ban. And it doesn't matter if it happens live or after the video is already archived. So they're clamping down on that, so I gotta be careful on this channel. If I know I'm playing something copyrighted, we'll do dLive or Joshua TV, just so we know we're safe. And it's not that I'm scared to lose the channel, it's just we're keeping on growing. It sucks to start back at 0 again. It really does, and then you guys have to find me. And I just can't in good faith make it Davey Crocko 10 if I ever got there. I would have to call it quits once I'm past 9. You know what I mean? I would get the hint. You're not allowed on YouTube anymore. But before I keep rambling on, it's 4 o'clock. I'm going to go eat myself some dinner. We may do a late night Epstein Files installment number 30 on the Epstein Files. This will be called The Prince and the Thief, obviously to do with Prince Andrew, I mean. And you guys will enjoy that. As he says, he couldn't have been raping anybody. Guys, I was out for pizza. They openly mock us. They openly mock you. So I think you guys will enjoy that stream as well. The Epstein Files have been very good for this channel, or all my channels, I guess. Oh, we still got the Amazon spy stuff as well, the Amazon Ring stuff. Man, the targeted individual documented cases versus YouTube crazies. We got that one to do. Dude, we got a lot of shit. We got the 1900s San Francisco earthquake. Damn, I got a lot of shit to get to. I better get to work. But I think we're at 4 hours of streaming so far today. If we do a stream later, we're talking 11 p.m., maybe midnight, something like that. So be prepared. Look out for notifications on this channel. And can you guys see this on the screen? Let me see if this shows up. Probably can't see it too big. Somebody commented on Mersh's video, National Domestic Violence Hotline. I said, and she put the number. I said, call me, bitch, I'll hit you. And someone said you could barely hit something with something. I don't know what she said, but alright, that's gonna do it. I don't know why I'm talking about that. 07, everyone. Love you guys. See ya in the next one. Yeah, I know I said doo-doo stream. I know I said that. I was hoping it would get away from you, but of course, internet catches everything. Internet is forever. I said doo-doo stream. That will be the title now. Look out for the doo-doo stream, Epstein Files, installment number 30. But honestly, guys, appreciate it. Thanks for hanging. Those 2 hours, we were over 110 people. That means we're growing over here, so that's a good thing. See you guys tonight. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Do something with yourselves.